In 2016, a 23-year-old man from Edinburgh woke up convinced he had lived that day before. The feeling was so strong that he could predict what his roommate would say next, where the butter dish sat on the table, the exact line of dialogue in a TV show he had never watched. That eerie sense of having already experienced a moment, the uncanny certainty that the present is a replay, is something almost everyone knows at least once in their lives. But for this man, it never stopped. Every hour felt like a loop. He stopped watching the news because he thought he had seen it all before. He became anxious, then depressed, convinced he was trapped in a kind of waking time travel. His doctors ran scans. They found a small scar in his right temporal lobe, near the hippocampus. The scar was from a mild brain infection years earlier, when he had barely noticed. That scar was firing off tiny electrical bursts, seizures so mild he never lost consciousness or convulsed. Instead, each burst flooded his memory centers with a false signal. "You've been here before." The diagnosis was temporal lobe epilepsy, and the symptom was an extreme, chronic form of déjà vu. The standard anticonvulsant medication stopped the seizures within weeks, and the déjà vu disappeared. But the case left researchers with a powerful clue. If a single electrical jolt can generate the feeling of remembrance, then normal déjà vu might be a smaller version of the same misfire, a brief moment when the brain's familiarity system fires without a matching memory. Déjà vu has been written about for centuries. The term itself is French for already seen, coined in 1876 by a French philosopher named Émile Boirac. But the scientific hunt for its cause really began in the 1950s, when neurosurgeons started stimulating the temporal lobes of conscious patients during surgery. Touch certain spots with a mild current, and patients would report a sudden, vivid sense of recognition, even though they were looking at a sterile operating room. They could not name the memory, but they knew they had been here before. This was déjà vu, artificially induced, and it pointed straight at the temporal lobe as the mismatch machine. So what is happening inside a normal brain during a typical déjà vu? The leading theory today is the memory mismatch model, also called the dual processing or retrieval failure hypothesis. Your brain has two separate systems for remembering. One system, located in the rhinal cortex, rapidly scans every incoming scene for familiarity. It is fast, automatic, and does not care about details. The second system, in the hippocampus, does the heavy lifting of recollection, pulling up the specific time, place, and context of a past event. Normally, these two systems work in sync. You see a face, the familiarity system signals yes, the recollection system finds the name and the dinner party where you met. But sometimes the first system says yes before the second system has a chance to catch up. You get the feeling of familiarity without any memory attached. That is déjà vu. A landmark study in 2016 by researchers at the University of St. Andrews put this theory to the test. They brought volunteers into a virtual reality lab and created a series of rooms that looked nearly identical but had small differences. One room might have a different painting on the wall, another a different rug. The participants explored these rooms and were later asked if they felt déjà vu. The results were striking. Déjà vu occurred most often when a room looked familiar, but the participant could not identify exactly what was different. The brain, having seen a similar layout before, sent a familiarity signal, but the mismatch between the expected details and the actual details prevented recollection. The participants felt they knew the room, but they could not say why. Another experiment in 2012 by researchers at the University of Bristol used a different approach. They gave participants lists of words that shared a theme, like sleep, bed, dream, but left out the expected word, night. Later, when shown the word night, many participants experienced a strong feeling of familiarity without any memory of having seen it before. This is called the DRM paradigm, and it reliably produces déjà vu in the lab. The brain, primed by the related words, builds a prediction that night should be familiar. But because the word was never presented, the recollection system comes up empty. The feeling is exactly the same as spontaneous déjà vu, but controlled enough to study in real time. This experiment revealed something crucial. Déjà vu is not a malfunction, it is a feature of a healthy brain that is trying to reconcile two conflicting signals. Your brain constantly predicts what it expects to see. When the prediction matches reality, you feel normal. When it does not, you feel a surprise. But in déjà vu, the prediction itself is wrong. The brain predicts that the current moment should be familiar, even though it is new. That conflict produces the strange feeling of simultaneous knowledge and ignorance. The phenomenon disappears almost as quickly as it arrives. Most déjà vu episodes last only 10 to 30 seconds. By the time you realize it is happening, the moment has already passed. This matches the brain's own error correction cycle. The rhinal cortex fires a familiarity signal. The hippocampus searches for the memory, finds nothing, and sends back a null result. The forebrain registers the mismatch, and the episode ends. The whole process is a small, fast loop that your conscious mind barely catches. Yet not every researcher agrees that déjà vu is always a retrieval failure. Some argue that it might be a conflict between two parallel streams of perception, one processing the overall scene and another processing details. When the two streams briefly fall out of sync, the brain registers the scene as familiar even though it is new. This theory, called the dual-stream hypothesis, has support from studies on patients with lesions in the visual cortex. They sometimes report déjà vu without any sense of familiarity for individual objects. The debate is unresolved, and it highlights that déjà vu may not be a single phenomenon, but a family of related glitches. But the story does not end with normal déjà vu. The extreme case from Edinburgh shows what happens when the loop gets stuck. Some people experience pathological déjà vu as part of epilepsy, dementia, or even migraine. In a 2018 study of patients with severe anxiety, researchers found that chronic déjà vu was linked to abnormal activity in the parahippocampal gyrus, a region that bridges perception and memory. These patients often could not leave their homes because every street felt like a replay. Their brains had lost the ability to break the cycle. There is a limit to how much we can learn from these cases. Many researchers caution that laboratory déjà vu is not exactly the same as the real thing. The virtual reality studies induced a controlled form of the feeling, but the spontaneous kind in daily life may involve more complex brain networks, including the medial prefrontal cortex and the thalamus. The exact circuitry is still debated, and the scientific literature openly states that no single model explains every instance. The brain is not a simple machine. What is certain is that déjà vu is not a psychic vision or a crack in the universe. It is a predictable glitch in the hardware that builds your sense of reality. That hardware is dense with implications. Consider what happens after a déjà vu. You stop for a moment and wonder if you dreamed this scene before, but you did not. The feeling is a ghost, a signal that has no source. And that is exactly what makes it so unsettling. Your brain is the only thing you have to tell you what is real. When it lies, even for a few seconds, the whole world wobbles. This wobble has real consequences. In a 2014 survey, frequent déjà vu was linked to higher rates of memory complaints, even in healthy young adults. People who experience déjà vu often also report feeling that their memories are less trustworthy. They double-check facts, reread instructions, and hesitate to trust their own recollections. The irony is that déjà vu itself is not a memory error, it is a feeling of error. But that feeling can erode confidence in the very system it exposes. A single misaligned signal makes you question everything you know. The Edinburgh man, once treated, returned to a normal life. He still feels the occasional brief déjà vu like anyone else, but he no longer fears that time is broken. He knows it is just his prediction system briefly misfiring. And that distinction matters. The brain is not a perfect camera, it is an active builder. It guesses, it fills in gaps, and sometimes it guesses wrong. That is the real lesson of déjà vu. The feeling that you have lived this moment before is not a glitch in time. It is a glitch in the machinery that lets you know you are alive. Every time it happens, you're seeing the seams of your own mind. The brain that tells you what is true is the same brain that occasionally cannot tell a new memory from an old one. You cannot trust it completely, but you cannot escape it either. The best you can do is notice the seams. They are the only proof that the building exists at all.